Welcome to my channel, The Eastern Lost Dynasties. They say beneath the mausoleum of the First Qin Emperor, there's another empire. Not of soil and stone, but of metal, clay, and secrets. For more than 2,000 years, people thought that was just a legend. Until a farmer dug a well in 1974, and his shovel hit something hard. Terracotta, a face that had been staring into the dark for over 2 millennia. The Terracotta warriors proved one thing: Qin Shi Huang really did build an underground world. But here's the twist. The more archaeologists dig, the less this world looks like a simple monument to a tyrant's ego. And the more it looks like a realistic snapshot of a living empire that we hardly recognize. If you grew up hearing that Qin Shi Huang was just a cold, brutal dictator, this story is going to mess with that image. Because today, we're not following the schoolbook version. We're following a quiet, stubborn archaeologist named Captain Duan, who spent 30 years at the foot of Li Mountain, chasing clues that most people ignored. And his trail doesn't start with noble tombs or golden treasure. It starts with a mass grave. In 2003, on the eastern side of the mausoleum, near a place called Shanren Village, an excavation team opened up a trench. They didn't find coffins. They found bones, skulls pressed against spines, leg bones thrown over rib cages, bodies stacked in chaotic layers like someone had just dumped them. No burial goods, no proper layout, no sign of respect. Just a pit full of people who died and were thrown away. Captain Duan looked at that mess of bones and had a terrible suspicion. For over 2,000 years, there had been a rumor in the records of the Grand Historian. After unifying the 6 states, Qin Shi Huang forced prisoners of war and convicted criminals from all over the empire to come to Li Mountain to build his tomb. More than 700,000 people in total. The conditions were so brutal that many of them simply died on the spot. Most historians treated that number as an exaggeration. 700,000 sounded like something a storyteller would invent. But this pit looked like the place where people died, and no one bothered to pretend otherwise. The team kept digging. Fragments of tile emerged. Marks, stamps, traces of workshop symbols. Piece by piece, the evidence lined up. These were indeed workers from the Mausoleum project. But then, something even stranger surfaced. Not from the soil, but from the lab. When researchers analyzed some of the remains, they found signs that at least one of these workers didn't look like a man from the Central Plains at all. His features, his genetic markers, pointed far to the west. And many others showed traits from the deep south, people from lands that, in Qin times, were barely under imperial control. So now the question changed. It was no longer just, did Qin Shi Huang force people to die building his tomb? It became, how did a man from the far west and men from the far south end up dying together on the same construction site at Li Mountain? Our history books usually compress that into one neat label: Shirong in the west, Nanman in the south, foreign barbarians. One word, and the complexity is gone. But the bones in the ground don't use polite labels. They tell you, the Qin armies marched far. They fought people we barely name. And when they were done, those captives didn't go home. They went under Li Mountain. That's the first layer of this story: brutality, conquest, and a pit with no coffins. But the next clue doesn't come from a grave. It comes from a different pit entirely. A pit that looks less like a tomb and more like a gym built for gods. Back in 1999, on another part of the mausoleum complex, the team opened up what looked like just another trench. Instead, they found something the textbooks had never prepared them for: acrobats. Life-sized, terracotta acrobats. 5 figures stood, or rather posed, inside the pit. Not stiff like the soldiers, not frozen in rigid military stances, but captured in the middle of movement. Their muscles were carved in detail. You could see the tension in the thighs, the thickness of the shoulders, even the tendons on the feet. The tallest one reached about 1.9 meters in height, towering over most people in that era. Sculpture experts looked at these figures and said, whoever made these wasn't just talented. They understood human anatomy, not as a vague idea, but with the kind of precision you'd expect from a culture that had carefully studied muscles and bone structure. But here's what made it even stranger. Before this acrobatics pit was built, the early terracotta figures of Qin were much more stylized. The soldiers were impressive, but they were still ceremonial, formal, standardized, almost idealized. After this pit, we don't see this level of realism again until the Han Dynasty. So why would Qin sculptors suddenly jump to hyper-realistic bodies for acrobats? Then that style disappears, and later, in another dynasty, it reappears. And there's one man in the historical record who seems to stand right at the intersection of this hidden performance world and the emperor's daily life. A tiny court jester with a ridiculous name and a surprisingly sharp tongue. His name was Yujan. On paper, it looks strange. Yu refers to his role. An entertainer? A performer? Zhan means flagpole. Put together, it's basically flagpole performer. Imagine that as your job title. Yujan was a dwarf in Qin's court, but he wasn't there just to make people laugh. He was an entertainer and a political pressure valve. One day, the emperor had a new idea. A massive enclosed hunting ground, stretching from Hangu Pass to Chenkang. He even picked a name for it, Large Yuanyu. It sounded grand. It also sounded like an insane use of manpower, land, and resources. The officials were horrified, but they were also terrified. No one dared to say no. So, once again, it fell to the flagpole clown. Yujan first played the fool, making the emperor laugh. Then, at the right moment, he pretended to praise the plan. Large Yuanyu is great, he chirped. Your Majesty should definitely keep more exotic animals there. Then, if enemies attack from the east, we just release the elk and trample them. The image was so ridiculous that even the emperor couldn't ignore it. He cancelled the project. But the story gets even stranger when you connect this flagpole performer to what archaeologists later found in the ground. Those hyper-real acrobatic figures. They weren't just random statues. There's a term that appears in later descriptions of acrobatic arts. Du Lu Shun Chuang. Du Lu was the name of an ancient kingdom, likely somewhere near what is now Myanmar. Shun Chuang literally means climbing the flagpole. On some old mural depictions, you see a strongman carrying a dwarf on top of a pole. Exactly the sort of act a flagpole performer would be part of. According to later research, this style of acrobatics spread from India to Burma, through Sichuan into the Qin Empire, and then into the Central Plains. In other words, we're not just talking about local circus tricks. We're looking at a performance tradition that traveled along an early trade route. So now, think back to that mass grave. War captives from distant southern lands. A laborer with Western features. Hyperreal acrobats who look like they were sculpted by artists who studied bodies for a living. Entertainers whose art can be traced back toward India. This is what the mausoleum is quietly telling us. The Qin world was not closed. It was plugged into long-distance routes of war, trade, and performance. If one old story is to be believed, even keeps the would-be assassin's friend as his favorite musician. Which brings us to one of the strangest stories in all of Qin history. In the northern kingdom of Yan, just before Qin swallowed it whole, 3 men met often in the marketplace to drink. Jing Ke, Gu Tubei, and Gao Jianli. Jing Ke was the one who would later walk into Qin's palace with a dagger hidden in a map. Gu Tubei was known for his courage. Gao Jianli was a musician, a master of an instrument called the zhu. Every time they drank together, they ended up in tears, because they knew what was coming. Qin wasn't a rumor anymore. It was a machine. State after state had fallen. Yan would be next. Their gatherings in the market were less about celebration and more about saying goodbye to a world being crushed in slow motion. When the moment finally came, and Jing Ke volunteered to go to Qin and assassinate the emperor, Gao Jianli played for him one last time. It was the kind of scene that sticks in your head, and a musician sending him off with a song that says everything words can't. Jing Ke, as we know, failed. The assassination attempt turned into a desperate scramble, ending with Jing Ke cut down in front of the throne. Yan was conquered. The old life was over. Gao Jianli vanished. He changed his name, hid his identity, and went to work as a servant in a noble household. But you can't bury talent that deep. His music drew attention. Soon people were talking about the mysterious servant whose playing could make audiences forget to breathe. Here, the records of the grand historian take a hard left turn. They say Qin Shi Huang, the same emperor famous for harsh laws and strict control, was actually a serious music lover. He heard about this unknown player, summoned him to court, and the moment he saw him, he recognized him. This wasn't just a random musician. This was Gao Jianli, Jing Ke's old friend, the man who had played that farewell song back in Yan. Under Qin law, that alone would have been enough to execute him. But according to the story, the emperor did something unusual. He didn't kill Gao Jianli. He had him blinded, and then he kept him as his personal musician. From that point on, Gao Jianli played for the man his friend had tried to kill. At least, on the surface. Secretly, Gao Jianli was planning revenge. He is said to have filled his instrument with lead to make it heavier. One day, when the emperor was completely absorbed in the music, Gao Jianli suddenly swung the zhu like a weapon and tried to smash his skull. He missed. The attempt failed. Another assassin. Another failure. Most modern historians have a hard time digesting this story. Would Qin Shi Huang really keep the accomplice of an assassin in his own court, even blinded, just for the joy of music? Is that even remotely realistic for a paranoid ruler? Or is this episode a dramatized tale, meant to make Qin look cruel, while painting its enemies as tragic heroes? We may never know. Someone in that court cared enough about music and performance to build entire pits dedicated to it. And those pits don't look like propaganda. They look like reality. It happened on a summer day. The kind of day when even archaeologists want to finish early and find some shade. Captain Duan was in the canteen, slurping down a bowl of noodles, when a team member ran in, out of breath. "Sunma village dug up a terracotta finger," he shouted. Duan didn't even finish his bowl. He left the noodles, jumped on his motorcycle, and rode out to the site. Birds, bronze birds. When the dust settled, the team realized what they had found. 46 bronze waterfowl, swans, cranes, geese, ducks, arranged along what had once been an artificial waterway. Each bird was cast life-sized and originally painted in color. Some stood with their heads lifted, beaks open in song. Some bent down as if nibbling at the water's edge. Others stretched their necks, caught mid-motion like a snapshot. They weren't lined up in neat military rows. They were arranged like a real scene by a riverbank, as if someone had paused time. A little further in the same pit, the team found terracotta figures. 15 of them. 8 were sitting on the floor in a way that made every historian's eyebrows shoot up. Their legs were stretched straight out in front of them. Now, today, that hardly seems worth mentioning. But in ancient China, chairs weren't common. People sat on mats, and there were rules. The standard polite position was sitting on your heels, knees on the mat, legs folded under you, back straight. That was the "we're equals and we're behaving" posture. If you were kneeling upright with your back rigid and your waist straight, that usually meant tension. Anger barely contained or a brewing confrontation. Still within ritual boundaries, but the air was heavy. Sitting with your legs stretched out? That was something else entirely. It was considered extremely rude, shameless, almost like saying, "I don't care about your rules anymore." What are you going to do about it? So now we're back at the waterfowl pit. We have 15 terracotta figures, and 8 of those are sitting with their legs stretched out in a posture that screams improper by ancient standards. What are they doing in a royal mausoleum? If the mausoleum was supposed to be a perfectly controlled ritual space, why would anyone bury figures in such an undignified pose? At first, even Captain Duan couldn't make sense of it. Then they found something else nearby. Scattered around the pit were small metal fittings and a large copper rod. The team took those to music experts. Their verdict was simple and shocking. These weren't random scraps. They were parts of instruments. Suddenly, the scene clicked into place. This wasn't just a river with birds. It was a stage. The bronze waterfowl formed the backdrop. The terracotta figures were musicians and performers, waiting for the show to begin. Those 8 figures sitting with their legs stretched out? They weren't being disrespectful. They were off duty. They were resting. In life, they probably sat like that backstage, relaxing before playing for the emperor, with the cranes pacing and preening beside them. Which brings us back to that question. Who was Qin Shi Huang? The textbooks give us a very clear picture. A stern ruler who read stacks of bamboo slips every day. A man obsessed with laws and documents. The villain who burned books and buried scholars. A faceless symbol of control. But the mausoleum tells a different story. In these pits, we see an emperor whose underground world includes foreign acrobats and midgets climbing flagpoles. Strong men immortalized in terracotta with every muscle in place. Birds cast in bronze mid-song. Musicians sitting with their legs stretched out, waiting for the crane performance to begin. This doesn't look like the afterlife of a man who hated art, music, or pleasure. It looks like someone who wanted to take his favorite parts of life, the shows, the music, the spectacle, and carry them with him into the dark. So which version is real? The paper tyrant? Or the hidden patron of performance and realism? And here's the most unsettling part. Our written histories, like Sima Qian's records of the Grand Historian, claim to know exactly what happened inside the palace. They describe Jin Kei's assassination attempt as if someone was standing right there. They tell us what Zhao Gao and Li Si supposedly whispered when they plotted to alter the imperial edict after the emperor's death. But how? How could anyone know those details? Who was in the room? Who lived long enough to tell that story to the man who wrote it down? Some historians think it all goes back to a single figure. A royal doctor named Wu Ju, who once threw a medicine chest to save the emperor during an attack, and may have lived long enough to talk to Sima Qian's generation. If that's true, then our history of Qin doesn't come from some all-knowing narrator. It comes from a narrow human chain of memory. Memory can exaggerate, it can dramatize, it can villainize. In the next part of this series, we'll follow the trail deeper. To the royal doctor who may have witnessed events that shaped our entire image of Qin. To the murdered princes and concubines buried in high-status tombs near the mausoleum. To the reconstructed faces that might be the closest thing we have to Qin Shi Huang's true appearance. And to the terrifyingly advanced technology hidden in the bronze chariots and other artifacts buried by his side. But for now, we'll leave the emperor where he is. That's all for today. One dynasty buried, another legend uncovered. You're watching the Eastern Lost Dynasties. Until the next excavation. Thank you for watching.